The moment that flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin like a knife, every passenger turned to stare at me. The failure of a mother who couldn't control her own babies. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish into the seat. But then something happened that changed everything. The man in the worn hoodie beside me, the one I'd barely noticed, stood up. And when he spoke, the entire plane went silent. Because nobody, not me, not that cruel flight attendant, not a single soul on that aircraft, knew who he really was. Comment below what city you're watching from, and stay until the end to see how far this story has reached. The overhead lights dimmed at exactly 10:47 p.m., and I remember thinking that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment they'd finally sleep. I was wrong. The cry started small, a whimper from Mia in my left arm, but within seconds, Mason joined in from the carrier strapped to my chest, and suddenly I wasn't a person anymore. I was just noise. Just the problem everyone wished wasn't there. My name is Lena Brooks, and 3 months ago I became a single mother to twins. Not by choice, not by some empowering decision to do it alone. My husband left 2 weeks before they were born, drained our savings, and disappeared into a life I'll never understand. The apartment went next, then my job, because newborns don't care about your shift schedule at a call center that doesn't offer maternity leave. So here I was, on a red-eye from Denver to New York, flying toward the only family I had left, my sister, who'd grudgingly agreed to let us crash in her spare room until I figured things out. If I figured things out. The tickets had cost me everything I had left, literally. $347 that should have gone toward diapers, formula, anything practical. But I'd run out of options, and my sister had been clear. Come now, or don't come at all. Mia's cry escalated, that piercing newborn wail that sounds like the end of the world to everyone within earshot. I bounced her gently, switching her to my other arm even though my shoulders were screaming. Mason sensed the shift in my movement and cranked up his volume to match. Shh, shh, babies, please, I whispered, my voice cracking. Please, please. Around me, the cabin had that late-night energy, dim lights, people settling under blankets, headphones going in. Or they had been. Now I could feel the shift, the awareness, the collective realization that their peaceful flight had just been hijacked by someone's inability to parent properly. A woman across the aisle pulled her sleep mask down just enough to glare at me. The businessman in front of me exhaled loudly and jammed his headphones deeper into his ears. A teenager 2 rows up turned around, her expression somewhere between pity and disgust. I'm sorry, I mouthed to no one in particular. I'm so sorry. But sorry doesn't stop babies from crying. Sorry doesn't give you extra hands when you're alone. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that I hadn't slept more than 2 consecutive hours in 13 weeks, that I'd been surviving on gas station coffee and whatever food I could eat one-handed, that I'd cried more in the past 3 months than in my entire life before them. I tried everything I knew, the gentle rocking, the soft humming. I checked diapers, both dry. I'd fed them 40 minutes ago in the terminal, so it wasn't hunger. Sometimes babies just cried, the pediatrician had told me. Sometimes there's no reason, no solution. You just have to endure. But try explaining that to a cabin full of people who paid good money for a quiet flight. The man beside me hadn't moved since takeoff. He'd claimed the window seat in a worn gray hoodie, the kind that had seen better days, with the hood pulled up despite the cabin warmth. I'd noticed him briefly during boarding, tall, maybe mid-30s, carrying nothing but a backpack. He'd nodded when I'd struggled past with my double stroller, babies, diaper bag, and the crushing weight of my inadequacy. But he hadn't offered to help. Most people didn't anymore. Single mother was written all over me, and people had opinions about that. Now he sat perfectly still, face toward the window, either asleep or very committed to ignoring the chaos erupting inches from his shoulder. "Ma'am," the voice came from above, sharp and professional. I looked up to find a flight attendant looming in the aisle. A woman in her 50s with her hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, her name tag reading Sandra. "You need to quiet those children." "I'm trying," I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "I'm really trying. Other passengers are trying to sleep. I know. I'm sorry. I'm doing everything I can." "Well, it's not enough." Sandra's voice carried through the cabin, louder than necessary. Several heads turned our way. "This is unacceptable." You're disturbing the entire flight. Heat flooded my face. They're 3 months old. They're babies. I can't just... Did you bring anything to calm them? Pacifiers? Medicine? They won't take pacifiers, and I can't give them medicine for crying. That's not... Then perhaps you should have considered whether you were ready to fly with infants before purchasing your ticket. The words hit like a slap. Around us, I could feel the judgment crystallizing. She was saying what everyone else was thinking. This woman shouldn't be traveling. This woman can't handle her own children. This woman is ruining our flight. I didn't have a choice, I said quietly, but Sandra had already moved on, making a show of checking on the passengers around me, asking if they were comfortable, if they needed anything, her sympathy flowing freely to everyone except the struggling mother who actually needed it. Mia's crying intensified. I stood carefully, trying not to disturb the man beside me, and moved toward the back of the plane, swaying and bouncing both babies as I walked. The aisle was narrow. People pulled their feet in as I passed, creating as much distance as possible, as if my failure might be contagious. In the galley, I found a small space near the bathrooms. The lighting was harsh, fluorescent, making everything feel even more desperate. I tried nursing Mia, hoping it might comfort her even if she wasn't hungry. She latched for a moment, then pulled away, crying harder. "Please, baby," I whispered, tears burning behind my eyes. "Please, I need you to work with me here." A different flight attendant appeared, younger, with kinder eyes. "Anything I can get you?" "I just need, I don't know, a pause button, a time machine, a different life." She offered a sad smile. "First time flying with them?" "First time doing anything with them alone." "Where's their father?" The question everyone always asked, loaded with judgment no matter how politely phrased. "Not here." She nodded, understanding in the silence. "You're doing fine. Babies cry. Anyone with half a brain knows that. Tell that to your colleague." "Sandra?" She grimaced. "She's been here 30 years, set in her ways. Try not to let her get to you." But Sandra had already gotten to me, had already vocalized the fear that lived in my chest every moment of every day. That I wasn't enough, that I was failing, that everyone could see it. I stayed in the galley for 20 minutes, rocking, humming, pleading silently with the universe for mercy. Eventually, miraculously, Mason quieted. Then Mia. The silence felt fragile, temporary, but I'd take it. I crept back to my seat, moving like I was defusing a bomb, and carefully lowered myself down. The man in the hoodie still hadn't moved. I arranged the babies as carefully as I could, Mia in my arms, Mason in the carrier against my chest. My back ached. My arms trembled with fatigue, but they were quiet, and that was everything. I closed my eyes just for a moment. The peace lasted 11 minutes. This time when they started together, a synchronized chorus of misery that seemed to vibrate through the entire aircraft. I tried everything again, faster, more desperately. Nothing worked. They were overtired, overstimulated, trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet, and they were done. So was I. Sandra appeared again, faster this time, her patience clearly exhausted. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to control your children immediately." "I'm trying. You're disrupting the entire cabin. This is beyond unacceptable." "What do you want me to do?" The question came out sharper than I intended, edged with the hysteria I'd been holding back. "They're babies. They cry. I can't make them stop just because you—" "Lower your voice. I'm not... If you cannot manage your children quietly, I'll have no choice but to report this to the captain." The threat hung in the air. Report me for what? For having babies who cried? For being alone and overwhelmed and doing my absolute best in an impossible situation? "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Completely serious. You're creating a disturbance." "They're 3 months old." "Then perhaps you shouldn't be flying." The cabin had gone quiet except for the babies. Everyone was listening now, watching the show. The mother who couldn't hack it. The woman who'd brought chaos onto their peaceful flight. I could feel their eyes, their judgment, their certainty that I was the problem. "I had to fly," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "I didn't have a choice. I have nowhere else to go." Sandra's expression didn't soften. "That's not my concern. My concern is the comfort and safety of all passengers on this aircraft." Safety, they're crying, not excessive stress can be a safety issue. Excessive stress? I'm the one. I stopped, realizing I was making it worse. Tears were running down my face now, hot and humiliating. Please, please, I'm doing everything I can. I need someone to understand that I'm trying. What you need, Sandra said, her voice cold and final, is to get those children under control, or I will have no choice but to take further action. She walked away and I sat there, crying as hard as my babies, the weight of 3 months crashing down all at once. The apartment I'd lost, the husband who'd left, the job that had let me go, the family that had kept their distance, the money that had run out, the sleep I couldn't get, the life I'd imagined that had evaporated like steam. I was failing. Publicly, completely, undeniably failing. And then the man beside me moved. I felt it more than saw it. The shift in the air, the intentional movement. He pulled his hood back, revealing dark hair, strong features, and eyes that weren't looking at me with judgment or pity. He looked calm, present. "May I?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Mia. I stared at him. "What?" "May I hold her? You look like you could use an extra pair of hands." You don't have to." "I know." He smiled slightly. "But I'm offering anyway." I hesitated. "You weren't supposed to hand your baby to strangers, but what choice did I have? I was drowning, and he was offering a rope." "Okay," I whispered. He took Mia gently, confidently, like he'd held babies before. She startled at the transfer but didn't escalate. He settled her against his chest, one hand supporting her head, the other under her bottom, and began a gentle rocking motion. "Hey there," he said softly. "Rough night, huh?" "Yeah, I get it. Flying's not fun. All the noise, the pressure changes, everybody's staring. That's tough. But you're okay. You're safe." His voice was low, steady, unremarkable in tone, but somehow exactly right. Mia's crying began to ease, dropping from a wail to a whimper. I focused on Mason, freed up now to give him my full attention. I repositioned him, tried nursing again, and this time he latched, his little body finally relaxing. The man kept rocking Mia, unbothered by the attention we were drawing. Some passengers looked relieved. Others seemed confused by this development. Sandra watched from the galley, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," I managed. "You really didn't have to. It's fine. I've got nowhere to be for the next 90 minutes. He glanced at me. "When's the last time you slept?" "Honestly, I can't remember." "Ate something real?" "Define real." "Something that wasn't from a vending machine or a drive-through window." I tried to remember. Couldn't. "It's been a while." He nodded, like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "What's her name?" "Mia, and this is Mason." "Lena, right? I heard the flight attendant use your name." "Yeah, Lena Brooks." I paused. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch yours." "Ethan," he said simply. "Ethan Hale." The name meant nothing to me. He was just a man in a hoodie who'd shown kindness when everyone else had shown judgment. That alone made him remarkable. Mia had quieted completely now, her eyes drooping. Ethan continued the gentle rocking, his movements practiced and sure. "You're good at this," I observed. "My sister has 4 kids. I've logged my hours." "That's kind of you. To help, I mean. Most people what? Pretend they don't see. Or they see and they judge. Tonight I got a lot of both." "People are uncomfortable with struggle," Ethan said quietly, "especially when they can't fix it quickly, so they blame the person struggling instead of examining the situation. Situation being that I'm a mess who can't handle her own kids? Situation being that you're alone on a red-eye flight with 3-month-old twins, which is objectively one of the hardest things a person can do, and instead of getting support, you're getting criticized." He looked at me directly. "That's not a reflection on you, that's a reflection on everyone else." Something in my chest loosened slightly. When was the last time someone had said something like that? When had anyone acknowledged that this was hard, legitimately hard, and not just a personal failure? "She threatened to report me to the captain," I said, like I'm some kind of criminal. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Yeah, I heard that. What was I supposed to do? Tape their mouths shut? Sedate them? They're babies. You're not supposed to do anything different than what you're doing. You're keeping them fed, safe, and cared for in a difficult environment. That's the job. You're doing it. Doesn't feel like it. Rarely does when you're in the middle of it. Mason had fallen asleep nursing, his small body heavy against me. Mia was out too, breathing softly against Ethan's chest. The cabin had returned to its dim, quiet state, the crisis apparently averted. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the crash coming, the adrenaline draining away and leaving only exhaustion so profound it felt like gravity had doubled. You can close your eyes for a bit if you want, Ethan said. I've got her. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. There's a difference. You don't know me. I could be anyone. You're a tired mother who needs 10 minutes of peace. That's all I need to know. I wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the independence I'd been clinging to like armor, but I was so tired, so desperately, completely tired. Just 10 minutes, I whispered. However long you need. I let my eyes close, and the relief was so intense it almost hurt. Just knowing someone else was holding part of the weight, even temporarily, even a stranger, it was enough to let me breathe. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but I did. When I woke, the cabin was still dark, still quiet. I jerked upright, panic flooding through me. How long had I been out? Where were my babies? Easy, Ethan said quietly. They're fine. You've been asleep about 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I'd slept for 40 minutes straight. It felt like a miracle. Mia was still nestled against him, completely conked out. Mason had shifted in his carrier but remained asleep, both babies, peaceful, both safe. I'm so sorry, I said immediately. I didn't mean to dump them on you, said. You didn't dump anything. I volunteered, remember? Still, your arm must be dead. I've had worse. He smiled slightly. Feel better? I search for the word. Human. I feel almost human. That's a start. I reach for Mia carefully, trying not to wake her. Ethan transferred her smoothly, and I settled her back against me, marveling at the weight of her, the reality of her. 3 months old, and she'd already seen more upheaval than most people experienced in years. Thank you, I said quietly. Really? You didn't have to do any of that. Maybe not, but it seemed like the right thing to do. Most people don't care about the right thing when it's inconvenient. Then most people are missing the point. I looked at him more carefully now, this stranger who'd stepped in when no one else would. There was something about him, a quiet confidence, a certainty that didn't need to announce itself. He wasn't trying to impress me or make himself look good. He just helped, simply, cleanly, without expectation. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. Why? Why help? You could have just put your headphones in like everyone else. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. Because I've spent a lot of time watching people, and I've learned that the moments that matter most are usually the ones where someone decides to show up when it's uncomfortable. You needed help. I could provide it. The math was simple. Most people don't think that way. Maybe they should. The flight attendant, not Sandra, the younger one, came by with water. Feeling better? She asked me kindly. Much, thank you. She glanced at Ethan with something like recognition in her eyes, then away quickly. Let me know if you need anything. When she left, I turned back to Ethan. She looked at you weird. Did she? Like she knew you. Maybe I have one of those faces. Do you fly this route a lot? Sometimes. He shifted slightly, and I got the sense he was deflecting, though I couldn't figure out why. What are you flying toward or away from? The question was gentle but direct. I found myself answering honestly. Both, I guess. Flying toward my sister in New York. She's the only family I have left. Flying away from Denver, where everything fell apart. The father? Everyone always asked eventually. Left before they were born. Took our savings, disappeared. I haven't heard from him since. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. I looked down at Mason, at Mia. But I have them, and they're worth every impossible moment. That's clear. Is it? Because an hour ago, I'm pretty sure the entire plane thought I was the worst mother alive. The entire plane was wrong. Anyone who's actually paying attention can see you love these kids fiercely. That's what matters. Tears pricked my eyes again, but different ones now. Grateful ones. You're very kind, Ethan Hale. I'm really not. I'm just practical. We fell into comfortable silence. Around us, the plane droned on, carrying its cargo of sleeping passengers toward New York, toward morning, toward whatever came next. I thought Sandra had let it go. I thought we'd survived. I was wrong. She appeared again 20 minutes later, materializing in the aisle like a storm cloud. But this time, her attention wasn't on me. It was on Ethan. "Sir," she said, her voice tight, "I need you to return to your assigned seat." Ethan looked up calmly. "This is my assigned seat." "You were not seated here during boarding." "Yes, I was. 14A window seat. Would you like to see my boarding pass?" Sandra's expression hardened. "I need you to stop interfering with this passenger's children." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. "Interfering?" I said, finding my voice. "He helped me. Ma'am, I'm addressing this passenger." "This passenger," Ethan said quietly, "was simply being a decent human being. Is that against airline policy?" "What's against policy is creating disturbances and failing to follow crew instructions." "I haven't failed to follow any instructions. You haven't given me any." "I'm giving you one now. Return to your seat and stop involving yourself in situations that don't concern you." "I am in my seat, and whether or not to help someone isn't your decision to make." Sandra's face flushed. "Sir, if you continue this behavior, I will have to report you to the captain for noncompliance." "Report me for holding a baby so a tired mother could rest?" "Go ahead. I'd be interested to hear what regulation that violates." Something shifted in Sandra's expression, uncertainty maybe, or anger that someone was pushing back. These children have been a disturbance since takeoff. These children are infants doing what infants do. The disturbance has been your reaction to them. "How dare you?" "I dare because I know what policies actually exist versus what policies you're inventing to justify harassment." Ethan's voice remained calm, level, but there was steel underneath. "Would you like me to recite the relevant regulations regarding passengers traveling with infants?" Sandra stared at him, something like recognition flickering across her face. "Who are you?" "Just a passenger, same as everyone else on this flight." But even I could tell that wasn't entirely true. There was something in how he spoke, how he carried himself. This wasn't just a guy in a hoodie anymore. This was someone used to being heard, to being taken seriously, to knowing exactly what he was talking about. Sandra seemed to sense it too. Her certainty wavered. "The mother needs support, not shame," Ethan continued quietly. "And these children need adults who understand that crying is communication, not criminal behavior. If you want to report someone to the captain, report me for pointing that out, but leave her alone." The silence stretched. Other passengers were definitely watching now, the confrontation impossible to ignore. Finally, Sandra stepped back. "We'll discuss this after landing." "Looking forward to it," Ethan said evenly. She retreated down the aisle, and I sat there, stunned. "You didn't have to do that?" I whispered. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "I did." "She's going to report you. She's not going to do anything. Trust me." "How can you be so sure?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "Because," he said quietly, "I helped write the policies she's pretending to enforce." I stared at him. "What?" "The airline's passenger guidelines, the protocols for crew interactions, the standards for how families with infants should be treated. I know them intimately, because I was part of creating them." "I don't understand. Are you a lawyer? A consultant?" Ethan pulled something from his back pocket, a business card, simple and expensive looking. He handed it to me. In the dim cabin light, I read the words printed there. Ethan Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Cascade Airlines. The world tilted. The man who'd been sitting beside me in a worn hoodie, who'd held my baby while I slept, who'd stood up to a flight attendant on my behalf. He owned the airline. "Oh my God," I whispered. It's okay. Oh my God, I had no idea. I never would have. Lena. His voice was gentle but firm. That's exactly why I fly like this sometimes. Because people treat me differently when they know. And I wanted to see how things really work, how passengers are really treated. Tonight, I got my answer. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. The CEO of the airline had held my screaming baby and let me cry on his shoulder and defended me against his own employee. Please don't worry, Ethan said. Nothing bad is going to happen to you, I promise. But Sandra will face appropriate consequences for how she treated you, not because I'm vindictive, but because what she did was wrong and it needs to be addressed. I don't want anyone to get in trouble because of me. This isn't because of you. This is because of choices she made. You understand the difference? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. The plane began its descent into New York, and Ethan carefully helped me pack up my scattered belongings, gathered my bags, made sure I had everything. When we landed, he didn't disappear. He stayed, helped me navigate getting the stroller set up, the babies secured, my luggage retrieved. What happens now? I asked as we walked through the terminal, him carrying my heaviest bag despite my protests. Now you go see your sister. You start rebuilding. You take care of those babies and yourself. And you? I have some conversations to have with my staff, some policies to review, some changes to make. We reached the exit where my sister was supposed to be waiting. I turned to face him. Thank you, I said, inadequate but sincere. For everything, for seeing me, for helping when no one else would. You're going to be okay, Lena Brooks, Ethan said. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. The strong ones rarely do. He handed me his card, a different one this time, with a personal number written on the back. If you need anything, he said, really need anything, call that number. I can't just call the CEO of an airline. You can call a person who cares what happens to you and your kids. That's all that number is. Before I could respond, my sister appeared, harried and impatient, her eyes immediately critical as she took in my disheveled state. Jesus, Lena, you look terrible. Nice to see you too, Sarah. Ethan gave me one last look, something like understanding passing between us, and then he walked away, just another passenger in a hoodie, invisible in the crowd. But I knew different now. I knew that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Sometimes strength looks like kindness. Sometimes the people with the most power are the ones who choose to see the powerless. And sometimes on the worst night of your life, a stranger becomes something more. A reminder that you're not as alone as you thought, that your struggle matters, that your worth isn't determined by who stayed or who left or who judges you from their comfortable seat. I watched him disappear into the terminal crowd, holding my babies close, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Just the smallest seed of it, but it was there. And that was enough to keep moving forward. Sarah's apartment smelled like expensive candles and judgment. Lena noticed it the moment she stepped through the door, babies in arms, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. The place was pristine, all white furniture and glass surfaces, the kind of home that screamed no children allowed in every carefully curated corner. You can stay in the guest room, Sarah said, not looking at her as she locked the door behind them. But we need to establish some ground rules. I work from home, so I need quiet. And I have clients coming by sometimes, so the babies can't be crying all hours. Lena set the carrier down carefully, her arms trembling. They're 3 months old, Sarah. They cry. That's what babies do. Well, figure it out. I'm doing you a favor here, Lena. The least you can do is be considerate. The words stung, but Lena was too tired to fight. She'd been awake for nearly 22 hours straight, surviving on adrenaline and desperation. The flight felt like a fever dream now. The humiliation, the crying, and then Ethan, especially Ethan. She pulled out the business card he'd given her, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Chief Executive Officer. She still couldn't quite believe it. Who's that from? Sarah asked, noticing. Just someone from the flight. A guy? Sarah's eyebrow arched. Seriously? You just got here and you're already... It's not like that. He helped with the babies, that's all. Sarah made a dismissive sound. Right, because men just help single mothers out of the goodness of their hearts. What did he want? Nothing. He was kind. Nobody's kind for free, Lena. You'll learn that eventually. Lena wanted to argue, to defend Ethan, to explain that sometimes people really did help without ulterior motives. But Sarah had already moved on, showing her to a small room with a daybed and a closet, making it clear this was temporary, making it clear Lena was a burden. That first week in New York was harder than the flight. Mason developed colic, screaming for hours every evening. Mia stopped sleeping longer than 45 minutes at a stretch. Sarah complained constantly about the noise, the mess, the disruption to her carefully ordered life. Lena spent most of her time in the tiny guest room, trying to keep the babies quiet, trying to be invisible, trying not to break down completely. She thought about Ethan's card often, about the number written on the back, about his words. If you need anything, really need anything. But needing and asking were different things, and Lena had learned long ago that asking for help usually came with strings attached. On the 8th day, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Brooks? This is Jennifer Chen from Cascade Airline's corporate office. Do you have a moment? Lena's heart lurched. Yes. Is something wrong? Nothing wrong at all. Actually, I'm calling because we'd like to discuss your recent travel experience. We understand there was an incident on your flight from Denver, and Mr. Hale has asked us to reach out. Oh, I didn't file a complaint or anything. We're aware. This is a proactive outreach. Would you be available for a brief conversation this afternoon? We can do it over video call if that's more convenient. Lena looked around the guest room, at the babies sleeping in their shared bassinet, at the chaos of her life spread across every surface. I guess so. What time? Would 2 o'clock work? Sure. At exactly 2 o'clock, Lena's laptop chimed with an incoming call. She'd managed to shower, put on clean clothes, and position herself so the camera wouldn't show the disaster behind her. The babies were miraculously asleep. Jennifer Chen appeared on screen, professional, warm, with the kind of competence that made Lena feel simultaneously reassured and inadequate. Ms. Brooks, thank you for taking the time. I want to start by apologizing for your experience on Flight 1847. The way you were treated was unacceptable, and we're taking the matter very seriously. I appreciate that, but honestly, I wasn't planning to make a big deal out of it. I understand, but we take all passenger concerns seriously, especially when they involve our most vulnerable travelers. Families with young children should feel supported, not shamed. Lena felt her throat tighten. The flight attendant, Sandra, she was just doing her job, I guess. I'm sure it's frustrating when babies cry. Her job is to ensure passenger safety and comfort for everyone on board, including you and your children. From what we understand, she failed to do that. Instead, she created a hostile environment and made threats that had no basis in our actual policies. How do you even know what happened? I mean, specifically. Jennifer's expression shifted slightly. Mr. Hale was on the flight. He provided a detailed account. He reported his own employee. He reported an incident that violated our values and policies. The fact that he witnessed it personally doesn't change the validity of the complaint. Lena sat back, processing. Ethan hadn't just helped her in the moment. He'd followed through. He'd made sure something changed. What happens to Sandra? She asked quietly. I can't discuss personnel matters in detail, but I can tell you she's currently on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're also reviewing our training protocols for all crew members to ensure this doesn't happen again. I don't want her to lose her job because of me. This isn't because of you, Ms. Brooks. This is because of choices she made. There's a difference. Jennifer paused. Mr. Hale said you might say something like that. He wanted me to emphasize that accountability isn't punishment. It's necessary for change. Lena smiled despite herself. That sounded exactly like something Ethan would say. There's another reason for this call, Jennifer continued. Mr. Hale wanted to ensure you have the support you need. He mentioned you're in a transitional housing situation. Heat flooded Lena's face. He told you about that? Only that you might benefit from resources. We have partnerships with several family support organizations in New York. If you're interested, I can connect you with... I'm fine. Really. I'm staying with family. Of course. But if that changes, or if you find yourself needing assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. Jennifer sent several links through the chat. These are local resources, housing assistance, childcare support, job placement services specifically for parents. No obligation, just information. After the call ended, Lena sat staring at the links. Part of her wanted to delete them immediately to prove she could handle this alone. But another part, the part that was so tired of drowning, clicked them open and started reading. 3 days later, Sarah delivered her ultimatum. This isn't working, Lena. The crying, the mess, the constant chaos. I can't do this anymore. You need to find somewhere else to stay. Sarah, please. I'm looking for work. I just need a little more time. I gave you time. 2 weeks. That was the deal. You never said 2 weeks. Well, I'm saying it now. I have a life, Lena. I can't put everything on hold because you made bad choices. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Bad choices? Having babies is a bad choice? Having babies you can't afford with a man who abandoned you? Yeah, that's a bad choice, and I'm not obligated to fix it for you. Lena looked at her sister, the stranger who shared her DNA but none of her compassion, and felt something harden in her chest. Fine. We'll be gone by the end of the week. Good. That night, sitting in the dark with both babies finally asleep, Lena pulled out Ethan's card again. Her pride screamed at her not to do it, not to ask for help, not to prove that she couldn't handle this alone. But her pride wasn't going to keep her babies housed. She dialed the number before she could change her mind. It rang 3 times. Then, hello? His voice, calm and familiar, made her throat close up. Ethan, it's Lena. Lena Brooks, from the flight. Lena, hi. Is everything okay? I'm sorry to call. I know you're busy and I shouldn't be bothering you. You're not bothering me. What's going on? The kindness in his voice broke something open. My sister is kicking us out. I have until Friday to find somewhere to go, and I don't have anywhere, and I know you said to call if I needed anything, but I don't even know what I'm asking for. Lena, stop, breathe. It's going to be okay. How? How is it going to be okay? Because you're not doing this alone anymore. Where are you right now? She gave him Sarah's address. Okay. Don't do anything tonight. Don't panic. Don't make any desperate decisions. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have someone from our family services partnership contact you. Her name is Maria Rodriguez. She's going to help you figure out next steps: housing, childcare, employment, all of it. Ethan, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. There's a difference. Those words again, the same ones he'd said on the plane. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice breaking. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're a good mother in an impossible situation. I know you deserve support, not judgment, and I know I'm in a position to help, so I'm going to. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. This isn't a loan, Lena. This is just what should happen when someone needs help. She was crying now, silently, tears running down her face in the darkness. I don't know what to say. Say you'll talk to Maria tomorrow. Say you'll let someone help you. That's all I need. Okay? Yes? Thank you. You're going to be okay, Lena Brooks. I promise. After she hung up, Lena sat in the quiet, feeling something she hadn't felt since before the twins were born. Not just hope this time, but something stronger. Belief. Belief that maybe, possibly, she could actually survive this. Maria Rodriguez called at 9 the next morning. By noon, Lena had toured a small but clean apartment in Queens, part of a transitional housing program for single parents. By evening, she had a move-in date and a list of resources longer than her arm: childcare subsidies, job training programs, support groups for new mothers. This is too much, Lena told Maria as they sat in a coffee shop, babies sleeping in their stroller. I don't deserve all this help. Maria, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense energy, fixed her with a look. Why not? Because I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong person. I should have been more prepared. So you're human. That doesn't mean you deserve to struggle alone. Maria leaned forward. Listen to me, Lena. This system exists because people need it, because life happens, because babies don't come with instruction manuals and partners don't come with guarantees. You're not taking something you don't deserve. You're using resources that exist specifically for situations like yours. But Ethan, Mr. Hale, he's paying for this, isn't he? Mr. Hale connected you to existing programs. Some have his company's support, yes, but most of this is public assistance, nonprofit resources, things you'd qualify for regardless. He just made sure you knew they existed. Still, he didn't have to do any of this. No, Maria agreed. He didn't, but he did anyway. Maybe instead of questioning why, you should focus on what comes next. What came next was hard work. Lena moved into the apartment with help from Maria and 2 other women from the housing program. She enrolled in an online certification program for medical coding, something she could do from home between feedings and diaper changes. She joined a support group for single mothers, where she met other women navigating similar struggles. The baby started sleeping better. Lena started sleeping better. Slowly, incrementally, life became less about pure survival and more about actually living. She didn't hear from Ethan directly for 3 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hi, Lena. It's Ethan. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. Maria mentioned you've settled into the new place. I'm actually in New York next week for some meetings. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I'd like to hear how you're doing. No pressure. Only if you're comfortable." Lena stared at the message for a long time. The CEO of an airline wanted to get coffee with her. The man who'd held her crying baby and changed her life wanted to check in personally. It felt surreal. She typed back, "I'd like that, thank you." They met at a quiet cafe near Central Park. Ethan arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down, looking nothing like a CEO and everything like the guy in the hoodie from the plane. "You look good," he said, smiling. "Rested. I feel almost human again. It's amazing what a few solid hours of sleep can do." "And the apartment, everything working out?" "It's perfect. Small, but perfect. The babies have their own room. There's a community room downstairs where I can work. And the other residents have been incredibly supportive." "That's great to hear." They ordered coffee. Lena got hers with an extra shot, a luxury she could almost afford now, and settled at a corner table. "I want to show you something," Lena said, pulling out her phone. She showed him photos of the apartment, of the babies in their new cribs, of her workspace set up with textbooks and her laptop. "This is what you made possible." "You made this possible," Ethan corrected. "I just opened some doors. You're the one walking through them." "Still, I don't think I've properly thanked you for the flight, for connecting me with Maria, for all of it." "You don't need to thank me, Lena. Honestly, that flight changed something for me too." "What do you mean?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. "I started flying incognito about a year ago. I wanted to understand what our passengers actually experience, not what gets filtered through reports and surveys. And what I learned is that we were failing people, regularly, systematically. We had policies that looked good on paper but meant nothing in practice." Sandra. Sandra was a symptom, not the disease. She'd been with the company 30 years, had excellent performance reviews, no complaints on file. But when I witnessed how she treated you, how she weaponized policy to punish instead of support, I realized we'd created a culture that allowed that, maybe even encouraged it. What changed? Everything. We've completely overhauled our training. Every crew member now goes through sensitivity training specifically focused on families traveling with young children. We've updated our policies to be more explicit about support versus enforcement, and we've created a passenger advocacy program. If someone feels mistreated, they have a direct line to report it. Because of one flight? Because of you, Ethan said quietly. Because watching you struggle while everyone around you judged made me realize we'd lost sight of our purpose. Airlines exist to connect people, to help them get where they need to go, not to make an already difficult journey harder. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. What happened to Sandra? She was given the choice to undergo retraining or retire. She chose retirement. Do you think she understood? Why what she did was wrong? Honestly, I'm not sure. But I think she understood that the culture had changed and she wasn't willing to change with it. He paused. Does that bother you? A little. I didn't want anyone to lose their job. She didn't lose anything. She chose to leave rather than evolve. That's different. They talked for over an hour. about the babies, about Lena's certification program, about Ethan's work trying to reshape company culture. He was easy to talk to, genuinely interested, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. "Can I ask you something personal?" Lena said eventually. "Of course. Why do you care so much? I mean, beyond the business reasons. You could have just changed policies and moved on, but you stayed involved. You made sure I was okay. Why?" Ethan looked out the window, watching people pass on the street. "My sister, the one with 4 kids I mentioned? She was in a situation similar to yours once. Different details, but the same desperation. Her husband had deployed. She was alone with 3 kids under 5, trying to fly across the country for a family emergency. And she was treated terribly. By gate agents, by flight crew, by other passengers who acted like her struggling was a personal affront to their comfort. What happened? She made it through, but barely. And afterward, she told me she'd never felt more invisible, more worthless, more like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be helped. It stayed with me, made me think about all the systems we build that forget about the humans using them. So when you saw me, I saw my sister. I saw every parent who's ever been made to feel like their struggle is shameful. And I had the power to do something about it, so I did." Lena reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Your sister is lucky to have you. I'm pretty sure she'd say I'm annoying and overprotective, but I'll take lucky too." They both laughed, and something settled between them. Not romantic exactly, but a genuine connection, a friendship built on honesty and mutual respect. As they were leaving, Ethan turned to her. "I have something else to tell you, and I want to be upfront about it. We're doing a feature in our company newsletter about the policy changes. I'd like to include your story, anonymously, if you prefer, because I think it illustrates why the changes matter." Lena hesitated. "My story? What happened on that flight? How it led to systemic changes? How support can transform outcomes? Only if you're comfortable, and you'd have full control over what gets shared. Can I think about it? Absolutely. Take all the time you need." But even as she said it, Lena knew her answer. Because staying silent, staying invisible, that's what people expected from single mothers in crisis. They were supposed to be grateful for scraps and never ask for more, never speak up, never take up space. Sharing her story meant claiming space. It meant saying this happened, and it mattered, and things needed to change. "Actually," she said, "I don't need time. Yes, use my story, use my name. I want other parents to know they're not alone." Ethan's smile was genuine and proud. "Thank you. This is going to help a lot of people." 2 weeks later, the article went live. It was honest, detailed, and unflinching in its assessment of what had gone wrong. It included Lena's perspective, her experience, her voice. And it ended with the changes being implemented. Concrete, measurable improvements designed to ensure no parent would face what she had faced. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Parents shared their own stories in the comments, horror stories of being shamed, unsupported, treated like problems instead of people. But they also shared gratitude for the changes, hope that things might actually improve. Lena's inbox filled with messages, some from other mothers thanking her for speaking up, some from Cascade employees expressing support for the new policies. One from Sandra herself, brief, defensive, insisting she'd done nothing wrong but ending with a grudging acknowledgement that times change. And one from Sarah. "I read the article. I didn't realize it had been that bad. I'm sorry for how I treated you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Lena stared at that message for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let Sarah live with her guilt. But another part, the part that had learned something about grace from Ethan's example, decided to respond. "Thank you for the apology. I'm not ready for a relationship yet, but maybe someday we can try again?" It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was possibility. And right now, that felt like enough. That evening, as Lena fed the babies and watched the sun set through her apartment window, her phone buzzed one more time. Ethan saw the response to the article. "You're making a real difference, Lena. I hope you know that." She typed back, "We both are. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away." Always. Lena set the phone down and looked at Mia and Mason, both growing so fast, both completely unaware of the journey that had brought them here. They'd never remember that awful flight, never know about the flight attendant who'd shamed their mother or the stranger who'd stepped in to help. But Lena would remember. She'd remember that in her darkest moment, someone had chosen kindness. Someone had used their power to lift instead of crush. Someone had proven that change was possible when people decided to actually care. And she'd make sure that when her children were old enough to understand, she'd tell them this story. Not as a tale of victimhood, but as proof that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's enduring alone, but sometimes it's accepting help when it's offered. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see you struggle and believe you deserve better. Mason yawned, his tiny face scrunching. Mia's eyes were already closed, her breathing soft and even. Peace in this small apartment, in this new life, in this future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Lena pulled them close, breathing in that distinctive baby smell, feeling their warmth against her chest. "We made it," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time since they were born, she actually believed it. The changes rippled outward faster than Lena had anticipated. Within a month of the article's publication, she started receiving invitations, podcasts wanting to interview her, parenting blogs requesting guest posts, advocacy groups asking her to speak at events. Each invitation felt surreal, like they were talking about someone else's life, someone braver and more articulate than the exhausted woman who'd sobbed on that airplane. She declined most of them. The certification program demanded her attention. The babies were entering a new developmental phase that required constant vigilance, and frankly, she wasn't sure she had anything valuable to say beyond what she'd already shared. But then Maria called with an opportunity that made her reconsider. "There's a family advocacy summit in Manhattan next month," Maria explained over the phone. "They want you on a panel about systemic barriers facing single parents. Ethan's company is one of the sponsors, and he specifically recommended you." "I'm not a public speaker, Maria. I can barely string together coherent sentences most days." "You don't need to be polished. You need to be honest. That's what people connect with." Lena shifted Mason to her other hip, wedging the phone between her shoulder and ear. "What if I mess it up? What if I say something wrong and it reflects badly on Ethan or the program?" "Then you'll be human, and people will relate to that too. Listen, Lena, you've spent your whole life trying to be invisible, trying not to take up space. Maybe it's time to do the opposite." The words hit harder than Maria probably intended. Invisible. That's exactly what Lena had been. To her ex-husband who'd left without looking back, to her sister who'd seen her as an inconvenience, to the passengers on that flight who'd wished she'd just disappear. Being seen, really seen, still felt dangerous. But staying invisible hadn't kept her safe. It had kept her stuck. "Okay," Lena heard herself say. "I'll do it." The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Lena worked with a speaking coach provided by the summit organizers, practiced her talking points until they felt natural, and tried on every outfit she owned before settling on something that felt professional but authentic. The night before the event, she could barely sleep, alternating between rehearsing her remarks and catastrophizing every possible way things could go wrong. Ethan texted her at midnight, "Stop overthinking, just tell the truth, that's all anyone needs to hear." "How did you know I was still awake?" she typed back. "Because I know what it feels like before these things. The fear that you're not enough, that you'll let people down, that they'll see through you and realize you don't belong there. But Lena, you belong there more than anyone." She stared at those words until her vision blurred. Then she set the phone down, checked on the sleeping babies one more time, and forced herself to lie down. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. The summit was held at a hotel in Midtown, the kind with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that made Lena feel acutely aware of her discount dress and secondhand shoes. She arrived early, her stomach churning, and found the green room where speakers were gathering before their sessions. That's where she saw Sandra. The woman was older than Lena remembered, her severe bun replaced with softer styling, her uniform traded for civilian clothes. But those eyes were unmistakable, the same ones that had looked at Lena with such contempt on that flight. Their gazes locked across the room. Lena's first instinct was to leave, to avoid confrontation, to make herself small again. But something Maria had said echoed in her mind. Maybe it's time to do the opposite. She walked over. Sandra, she said simply. The older woman's expression cycled through surprise, discomfort, and something that might have been shame. Lena, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm speaking on a panel about what happened on our flight. Sandra flinched. I see. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Lena could feel other people in the room glancing their way, sensing tension but not understanding its source. I want you to know something, Lena said quietly. I never wanted you to lose your job. I didn't lose anything. I chose to retire. Because staying would have meant admitting you were wrong. Sandra's jaw tightened. I was doing my job, maintaining order in the cabin, ensuring passenger comfort. You were punishing me for making you uncomfortable. There's a difference. Those babies were disrupting the entire flight. Those babies were being babies. I was the one you had a problem with. A single mother, overwhelmed, not performing motherhood perfectly enough for your standards. Color rose in Sandra's cheeks. You're twisting what happened. Am I? Because I remember you threatening to report me to the captain like I was dangerous. I remember you ignoring me when I asked for help and offering sympathy to everyone around me instead. I remember you trying to separate me from the one person who showed me kindness. Lena kept her voice level, not angry, but firm. You made the worst night of my life worse, and you did it deliberately. I had no way of knowing what you were going through. You didn't need to know my story to treat me with basic human decency. That's the point. You saw a struggling person and decided they deserved to struggle more. Sandra looked away. Things are different now. They've changed everything at the airline, all the training, all the new policies. It's all about coddling people who can't handle minor discomfort. It's about recognizing that compassion isn't weakness and that your job is to help people, not judge them. Lena paused, watching Sandra's face. Why are you here? At a family advocacy summit? Court-ordered community service, part of a settlement agreement. Sandra's voice was bitter. After I retired, I may have posted some things online about the incident. The company's legal team took issue with it. What kind of things? My perspective. About how modern parents are too soft, how children are allowed to run wild, how standards have fallen. She stopped, seeming to realize how she sounded. So you still don't think you did anything wrong? I think I was made a scapegoat for systemic issues I didn't create. Lena studied her, this woman who'd wielded her small amount of power like a weapon, who'd mistaken cruelty for professionalism, who even now couldn't see past her own righteousness to recognize the harm she'd caused. I hope you learned something today, Lena said finally. I hope you hear these stories and realize that being right isn't the same as being kind. And I hope that someday you'll understand why what you did mattered. She walked away before Sandra could respond, her hands shaking but her head clear. That conversation had been necessary, not for Sandra's benefit, but for her own. She'd faced the person who'd made her feel worthless and refused to accept that narrative anymore. The panel started at 2 o'clock. Lena sat on stage with 4 other speakers, a housing advocate, a child care policy expert, a single father who'd lost custody due to poverty, and a family court judge. The moderator opened with broad questions about systemic barriers, and Lena listened as her fellow panelists spoke eloquently about legislation, funding gaps, and institutional failures. Then the moderator turned to her. Lena, your story has resonated with thousands of parents online. Can you talk about what happened and how it reflects larger patterns of how we treat struggling families? This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for. Lena looked out at the audience, maybe 200 people, some taking notes, others recording on phones, all waiting to hear what she had to say. 6 months ago, I was on a red-eye flight with my twin babies, she began, her voice steadier than she expected. I was flying toward the only family I had left because I'd lost everything else. My husband, my home, my job, my savings. I was holding on by my fingernails, trying to keep 2 3-month-olds calm on an airplane, and I was failing publicly. She told them about the stares, the whispered complaints, the isolation of being surrounded by people who saw her as a problem rather than a person. She told them about Sandra's threats, about the humiliation of being scolded like a child while her baby screamed and she fell apart. But here's the thing that matters most, Lena continued. That flight attendant wasn't an anomaly. She was a symptom of how we treat parents, especially single mothers, especially poor mothers, especially mothers who aren't performing motherhood the way society expects. We're supposed to be grateful, quiet, and invisible. We're supposed to manage impossible situations without asking for help or making anyone uncomfortable. And when we can't, when we're human and struggling and visible, we're punished for it. She saw heads nodding, people leaning forward. Someone did help me that night, a stranger who held my baby while I fell apart, who stood up to that flight attendant, who later used his power to change the system that enabled her behavior. But here's what I've learned since then. I shouldn't have needed a CEO flying incognito to receive basic human compassion. That should be the baseline, not the exception. Lena's voice grew stronger. We've built systems that treat struggling parents like they're failing morally rather than systemically. Like if they just tried harder, planned better, made smarter choices, they wouldn't need help. But that's not how life works. Jobs disappear, partners leave, health fails, disasters strike. And when they do, people need support, not shame. She talked about the housing program, about Maria's advocacy, about the difference between charity and justice. She talked about the other mothers she'd met who were working 3 jobs and still couldn't afford childcare, who'd lost custody of their kids because poverty was treated as neglect, who'd been evicted because their babies cried too much. The changes at Cascade Airlines matter, Lena said, but they're not enough. We need changes everywhere, in how we structure work, in how we provide housing, in how we fund childcare, in how we judge the people who need help. We need to stop treating struggle as a character flaw and start treating it as a systems failure. When she finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. The moderator had to wait for it to die down before moving to the next question. Lena felt lightheaded, like she'd just run a marathon, but also strangely powerful. She'd said what needed to be said. She'd used her voice. During the networking break afterward, people approached her constantly. Other mothers sharing their stories, advocates exchanging contact information, journalists requesting interviews. It was overwhelming but validating, proof that her experience mattered, that speaking up had value. Then she saw Ethan standing near the back of the room, and her breath caught. He was in a full suit this time, clearly here in his official capacity, but his expression was warm and proud. "You killed it up there," he said when she reached him. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell. You sounded like you'd been doing this for years." "Liar, I saw my hands shaking on the video monitor." "Okay, you were nervous, but you were also brilliant, honest, powerful, necessary." Lena smiled. "Thank you for pushing me to do this." "I didn't push, I just opened the door. You walked through it." A woman in an expensive blazer approached them, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Hale, I'm Rebecca Morrison from the National Family Policy Institute. We've been hoping to speak with you about expanding your company's family support model to other industries." "Of course," Ethan said. "Have you met Lena Brooks? She's the reason those policies exist." Rebecca turned to Lena with new interest. "I'd love to include you in that conversation if you're available." Sure. Yes." They exchanged information, and Rebecca moved on. 3 more similar interactions followed. Policy wonks and nonprofit directors and corporate consultants all wanting to talk about what Cascade had done and how to replicate it elsewhere. "This is surreal," Lena murmured to Ethan between conversations. 6 months ago, I couldn't get anyone to return my calls about food assistance. Now people want my input on national policy? You have something they need, lived experience and the credibility that comes with it. That's more valuable than any degree or title." "It doesn't feel valuable. It feels like trauma people want to mine for content." Ethan's expression sobered. "If at any point this becomes too much, you can step back. You don't owe anyone your story." "I know, but I also know that if I don't tell it, things won't change, and I'm tired of things staying the same." That evening, Lena took the subway back to Queens, her head spinning with business cards and possibilities. The babies were with a sitter from the housing program, another single mother who'd become a friend, who understood the complexities of their shared situation. When she arrived home, she found a note slipped under her door. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neat handwriting. "I listened to your panel today. I heard what you said about compassion versus judgment. I want you to know that I've thought a lot about that night on the plane, about my choices and their impact. I'm not sure I fully understand yet, but I'm trying to. Your children are lucky to have you as their mother. I'm sorry I couldn't see that when it mattered. Sandra. Lena read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't even really an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was something, a crack in the certainty, a willingness to question, a first tiny step toward understanding. She folded the note carefully and put it in her desk drawer. Maybe someday Sandra would fully get it. Maybe she wouldn't. But that wasn't Lena's responsibility. Her responsibility was to keep moving forward, to keep telling the truth, to keep building the life her children deserved. Over the next 2 months, that life expanded in ways Lena hadn't imagined possible. The National Family Policy Institute hired her as a consultant, paying her to review proposed legislation through the lens of lived experience. A major parenting website offered her a regular column. She was invited to speak at a congressional hearing on child care policy. Each opportunity felt both empowering and terrifying. Lena still struggled with imposter syndrome, still had days where the baby screamed for hours, and she questioned every decision she'd made. But she also had Maria's steady guidance, the support of her housing community, and Ethan's ongoing friendship. Because that's what it had become, friendship. They texted regularly, met for coffee when his schedule allowed, fell into an easy rapport that felt rare and valuable. He never treated her like a charity case or a corporate responsibility. He treated her like an equal, someone whose perspective he valued, whose company he enjoyed. You know, people probably think we're dating, Lena said one afternoon over coffee, watching tourists navigate Times Square through the cafe window. Ethan laughed. Let them think what they want. Doesn't that bother you? The CEO of a major airline spending time with some random single mom? People might make assumptions. People always make assumptions, usually wrong ones. Besides, you're not some random anything. You're my friend. That's all that matters. Still, your board of directors probably wouldn't approve. My board of directors doesn't get to dictate my personal life. And frankly, knowing you has made me better at my job. You've taught me things about empathy and systems thinking that no business school ever covered. Lena stirred her coffee, choosing her next words carefully. Can I ask you something personal? Always. Why aren't you in a relationship? I mean, you're successful, kind, decent looking. She caught his amused expression. Okay, very good looking. But you never mentioned dating anyone. Observant. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Honestly, most people are either intimidated by what I do or interested because of what I do. It's hard to find someone who sees past the title to the actual person underneath. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it is, but I'd rather be alone than be with someone who's in love with the idea of me rather than the reality. The reality being? That I'm basically a nerd who likes spreadsheets and efficiency models and gets way too invested in customer satisfaction metrics. Not exactly romantic. Lena smiled. I don't know. There's something appealing about someone who cares that much about doing things right. Yeah? Yeah, it's why you noticed me on that plane when everyone else looked away, because you actually care about the details, about the human beings in those seats. That's not nerdy. That's decent. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softness Lena hadn't seen before. You know, when I first started flying incognito, I was looking for problems to fix. Operational inefficiencies, service gaps, policy failures. But that night with you, it changed my focus. I wasn't just looking for what was broken in the system anymore. I was looking for who the system was breaking. And there are so many people, single parents, disabled passengers, elderly travelers, anyone who doesn't fit the neat profile of the ideal customer. They're all struggling with systems designed without them in mind. And most of them are invisible because we've trained ourselves not to see inconvenient truths. So what are you going to do about it? Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her something, a detailed proposal for a new initiative called the Inclusive Travel Program. We're piloting this next quarter, dedicated support for vulnerable travelers, specialized training for crew members, partnerships with advocacy organizations. It's everything we learned from your experience, scaled up. Lena scrolled through the document, seeing her story's fingerprints on every page. This is incredible. This is necessary, and you helped make it happen. We helped make it happen. Fair enough. Ethan put his phone away. So what's next for you, besides changing national policy and becoming a parenting influencer? Lena laughed. Influencer's generous. I have like 3,000 followers, half of whom are probably bots. 3,000 people hearing your message is 3,000 more than before. True. As for what's next, she paused, considering. I want to finish my certification, get stable employment, maybe eventually move out of transitional housing into something permanent. Normal stuff. Normal is underrated, says the CEO, says the guy who would trade a lot of what he has for genuine connection and peace of mind. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city rush past outside. Somewhere in Queens, Mia and Mason were probably waking from their naps, ready for afternoon chaos. Somewhere in corporate offices across the country, policies were changing because one woman had refused to stay invisible. Somewhere between who she'd been and who she was becoming, Lena Brooks was finding her footing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Someone from the Today Show just called asking about you. Should I give them your number? Lena showed Ethan the message. This is getting out of hand. Or it's getting exactly where it needs to be. Your voice matters, Lena. More people should hear it. What if I mess it up? What if I say something wrong and it undermines everything we're trying to build? Then you'll be human and you'll correct course and you'll keep going. That's how this works. There's no perfect way to do any of this. There's just showing up and trying. Lena typed a response to Maria. Yes, give them my number. She looked up at Ethan. You're a bad influence, making me do scary things. Good. You're too comfortable with invisible. Time to practice visible. As Lena left the cafe and headed back to Queens, she thought about visibility, about how terrifying it was to be seen, really seen, with all your struggles and failures on display. But she also thought about the alternative, about staying small and silent and safe in her insignificance. That version of safety had nearly destroyed her. This new visibility, uncomfortable as it was, felt like the opposite of destruction. It felt like building something real. The Today Show interview aired on a Tuesday morning in late September, and Lena watched it from her living room with Maria, both of them holding coffee mugs like shields against whatever response might come. Seeing herself on television felt like watching a stranger. This composed woman in borrowed business clothes talking about systemic failures and personal resilience. Was that really her? The same person who'd sobbed in an airplane bathroom 6 months ago? You look good, Maria said. Professional, credible. I looked terrified. Nobody else can tell, trust me. The segment ran for 8 minutes. They'd edited it well, weaving Lena's story with footage of Ethan discussing the airline's policy changes, graphics showing statistics about single-parent poverty, and brief interviews with other mothers sharing similar experiences. It was comprehensive, impactful, and deeply personal. Lena's phone started buzzing before the segment even ended. Texts from people she hadn't heard from in years, emails from journalists requesting follow-up interviews, messages from strangers thanking her for speaking up. The attention was overwhelming and validating in equal measure. Then her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. Ms. Brooks, this is Catherine Wheeler from the Department of Health and Human Services. I caught your segment this morning, and I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. Lena's heart rate spiked. What kind of opportunity? We're forming an advisory council on family support services. Real people with lived experience helping shape policy at the federal level. Your name keeps coming up in our preliminary conversations. Would you be interested in learning more? Yes. Absolutely yes. They scheduled a call for the following week, and when Lena hung up, she just sat there, staring at her phone. What? Maria demanded. What was that? I think I just got invited to advise the federal government. Of course you did. You're Lena Brooks. You change systems before breakfast now. Lena laughed, slightly hysterical. 6 months ago I was homeless, literally homeless, Maria, and now you're using what you learned from that experience to help other people avoid it. That's not luck, Lena. That's you refusing to let trauma be meaningless. The words settled something in Lena's chest. She hadn't thought about it that way, that she was choosing meaning, actively constructing purpose from pain. It felt powerful and fragile at the same time. Mia started crying from the nursery, her I'm awake and displeased about it cry that Lena had learned to distinguish from at least 4 other variations. Mason would follow in approximately 90 seconds. They'd developed a tag team wake-up routine that was both adorable and exhausting. Duty calls, Lena said, standing. You're doing good, you know, Maria said. Really good. I'm proud of you. The words caught Lena off guard. When was the last time someone had said they were proud of her? Not proud of her accomplishments or her resilience, but just proud of her, the person underneath all the struggle and survival. Thank you, she managed, for everything, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. That's what we do. We see each other through. After Maria left, Lena settled into the familiar rhythm of morning routines. Diaper changes, bottle preparation, the delicate choreography of managing 2 babies who'd decided to synchronize their neediness. But even in the chaos, she felt different, steadier, like she'd found bedrock beneath her feet instead of constantly swimming in deep water. The call with HHS came the following Thursday. Catherine Wheeler was joined by 2 other officials, and they spent 90 minutes discussing the advisory council's scope and Lena's potential role. They wanted her perspective on everything from childcare subsidies to housing assistance programs, from employment protections to healthcare access. We need voices like yours, Catherine explained. People who understand these systems from the inside, who can identify gaps we can't see from our position. I'm not a policy expert, Lena cautioned. I don't have formal training in any of this. You have something better, direct experience navigating impossible systems and surviving despite them. That expertise is invaluable. They offered her a position as a community advisor, part-time with flexible scheduling to accommodate her children. The stipend wasn't enormous, but combined with her consulting work in the column, it meant stability. Real, sustainable stability. I need to think about it, Lena said, even though every cell in her body was screaming yes. Of course, take a week, talk to your family, consider the commitment. But Lena, we really hope you'll say yes. After the call ended, Lena sat in silence, processing. A week ago, she'd been worried about making rent. Now she had multiple income streams and a potential role shaping federal policy. The whiplash was dizzying. She texted Ethan, "Need your advice. Coffee tomorrow?" His response came immediately. "Absolutely. Same place, 2 p.m.?" The next afternoon, Lena arrived at their usual cafe to find Ethan already there, 2 coffees on the table and his laptop open to what looked like a complicated spreadsheet. "Working on a Friday?" she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Corporate restructuring proposal. Thrilling stuff." He closed the laptop. "But you didn't come here to talk about my boring work." "What's going on?" Lena told him about HHS, about the advisory council, about the opportunity and the terror it inspired. "It feels too big," she finished, "like I'm going to wake up and realize this was all some elaborate mistake." Or, Ethan said carefully, it feels exactly the right size for someone who's been underestimating herself for her entire life. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Lena, you've spent so long thinking you were the problem that you can't recognize when you're actually the solution. I'm not anyone's solution. I'm just a person who went through something hard and talked about it. You're a person who went through something hard, analyzed the systems that made it harder, articulated those failures clearly, and now has the opportunity to fix them at scale. That's not just talking about it. That's changing it. Lena stirred her coffee, avoiding his eyes. What if I'm not smart enough? These are people with PhDs and decades of experience. I barely finished community college. Intelligence isn't measured in degrees. Some of the smartest people I know never went to college. And some of the dumbest people I know have multiple advanced degrees. Ethan leaned forward. You understand something those HHS officials don't, what it actually feels like to need help and encounter barriers at every turn. That understanding is worth more than any credential. You really believe that? I know that. I've watched you take your experience and transform it into actionable change. You didn't just survive. You analyzed, articulated, and advocated. That's extraordinary. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm scared. Good. That means it matters. If you weren't scared, I'd be worried you weren't taking it seriously. What if I fail? Then you'll learn something and try differently next time. That's how everyone operates. The difference is you're starting from a place of genuine understanding instead of theoretical knowledge. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe bustling around them with the Friday afternoon crowd. "Can I tell you something?" Lena said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Always. Sometimes I feel guilty about how things worked out. There are thousands of women in situations like mine, maybe worse, and they don't get CEOs holding their babies and connecting them to resources. They just struggle. And I got lucky because you happened to be on my flight. That doesn't feel fair." Ethan's expression softened. "You're right. It's not fair. The system shouldn't require lucky coincidences for people to access basic support. But that's exactly why opportunities like this HHS position matter. You can help build systems where luck isn't required, where support is structural rather than coincidental. One person can't fix everything. No. But one person can start conversations that lead to changes that help thousands of people. You're already doing it, Lena. The airline policies, the advocacy work, the visibility you've brought to these issues, that's all ripple effects from you refusing to stay silent." Lena wiped her eyes. "When did you become so good at pep talks?" "I have a sister who calls me every time she doubts herself. I've had practice." "How is she, by the way? You never talk about her much." "Claire's good. Thriving, actually. Her youngest just started kindergarten, so she's got a few hours to herself during the day for the first time in 6 years. She's using them to write a book." "About what?" "Military families and the specific challenges of deployment. Her husband's been deployed 4 times since they married. She's got stories." "I'd like to meet her sometime." "She'd like that too. Actually." Ethan pulled out his phone. "She saw your Today Show segment. Sent me this." He showed Lena a text. "This is the woman from the plane? Oh my God, Ethan, you buried the lead. She's amazing. Please tell me you're staying in her life." Lena felt warmth spread through her chest. "You talk about me to your sister?" "Of course I do. You're important to me." The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Neither of them seemed ready to examine fully. "You're important to me too," Lena said finally. "I don't think I've properly expressed how much your friendship means, how much you've changed my life." "We changed each other's lives. That's how real friendship works." They finished their coffee talking about lighter things, the baby's latest developments, Ethan's frustration with a board member, plans for the upcoming holidays. But underneath the casual conversation, something had shifted, an acknowledgement of how deeply they'd become woven into each other's lives, how much they'd come to depend on these moments of connection. When Lena got home that evening, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No stamp, hand-delivered. Inside was a card with a simple message. "Say yes to the opportunity. You're ready. You've always been ready. You just needed to see it. E." She pressed this card to her chest, feeling the full weight of being seen, being believed in, being valued not despite her struggles, but because of how she'd navigated them. The next morning, she called Catherine Wheeler. "I'm in," Lena said. "When do we start?" The Advisory Council's first meeting was scheduled for mid-October in Washington, D.C. HHS arranged travel and accommodations, and Maria agreed to watch the babies for the 2-day trip. Lena had never been to the nation's capital, never imagined she'd have reason to go, and now she was flying there to help shape policy. The night before her flight, Ethan called. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified. What if I don't belong there? What if everyone else is talking policy jargon and I can't keep up?" Then you ask for clarification. You request plain language. You remind them that policies affecting real people should be understandable to real people. That's allowed? Lena, you're not there to impress them with how much you know. You're there to tell them what they need to hear. There's a difference. Okay, I can do that. You absolutely can. And Lena, I'm proud of you for taking this leap, for trusting yourself, for showing up even when it's scary. Thank you for everything, for seeing potential I couldn't see in myself. I just recognized what was already there. The flight to DC was uneventful. No crying babies, no hostile flight attendants, just Lena in a window seat with a folder full of preparation materials and a heart full of determined fear. She thought about that other flight, about who she'd been then versus who she was now. Same person, technically, but transformed by circumstance and choice and the decision to believe she deserved better. The first advisory council meeting was held in a conference room that felt designed to intimidate. Long table, leather chairs, official seals on the walls. Lena was one of 12 advisors, and as introductions went around the table, she heard impressive credentials: doctorate in social work, 20 years in nonprofit leadership, former state senator, community organizer with 3 decades of experience. Then it was her turn. I'm Lena Brooks. I'm a single mother of twins, a survivor of the systems we're here to discuss, and someone who believes we can do better. Simple. Honest. Hers. The meeting itself was intensive. 4 hours of discussing program inefficiencies, bureaucratic barriers, and the gap between policy intention and lived reality. Lena spoke up less than others initially, still finding her footing, but when she did contribute, people listened. With respect, she said during a discussion about housing assistance applications, the 17-page form you're describing, that's not accessible to someone working 2 jobs and caring for children. It's not even accessible to someone with time and resources. It's a barrier disguised as a process. The former state senator nodded. Valid point. What would you suggest? Simplify it. Ask for essential information only. Create video tutorials for completion. Offer assistance at application sites. Make the default assumption that people applying for help need help with the application too. They took notes. They asked follow-up questions. They treated her input as valuable, not despite her lack of formal credentials, but because of her direct experience. During the lunch break, Catherine Wheeler approached her. You're doing great, she said. Exactly what we hoped for. Grounded perspective without pulling punches. I'm probably being too blunt. You're being appropriately blunt. These conversations need honesty, not politeness. That evening, Lena video called the babies. Maria held the phone while Mia and Mason babbled at the screen, their faces lighting up at the sight of their mother. The ache of missing them was physical, but it was balanced by the knowledge that she was doing important work, that her temporary absence served a larger purpose. After saying goodnight to the babies, she called Ethan. How'd it go? He asked immediately. Better than expected. Scary, but good. They actually listened. Of course they listened. You're brilliant. I'm functional. There's a difference. You're brilliant and functional. Stop arguing with me. Lena laughed. Fine. I'm brilliant. Happy? Delighted. What's tomorrow's agenda? They talked for an hour about the meeting, about his current projects, about everything and nothing. These conversations had become essential to Lena, a touch point that grounded her no matter how overwhelming everything else became. Ethan, she said as they were saying goodnight, can I ask you something personal? Always. Do you ever wish things were different, between us, I mean? That we'd met under normal circumstances as equals instead of whatever that flight was. He was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes. But then I think about how we probably never would have met under normal circumstances. You would have been in economy. I would have been in business or first class. We'd have passed through the same space without ever seeing each other. But if we had met normally, then we'd be different people. You wouldn't have the perspective that makes you effective at what you do. I wouldn't have learned what I needed to learn about empathy and systems. We'd be strangers. So you're saying my trauma was necessary? No. I'm saying you transformed your trauma into purpose. And that transformation is what makes you remarkable. The circumstances were awful. What you built from them is extraordinary. Lena absorbed that. I wish more people understood that distinction. Most people are uncomfortable with complexity. They want either pure victim narratives or pure triumph narratives. They can't handle the truth that most of life exists in the complicated middle. The complicated middle is exhausting. Yes, but it's also where real growth happens. The second day of meetings focused on implementation strategies, how to actually operationalize the changes they'd discussed. Lena found herself contributing more freely, her earlier nervousness replaced by engaged investment. These weren't abstract policies anymore. They were potential lifelines for people like her, struggling in systems designed without them in mind. During a discussion about childcare subsidies, another advisor, a woman named Patricia with decades of nonprofit experience, pushed back on one of Lena's suggestions. That's idealistic. Patricia said. The reality of funding constraints means we have to make difficult choices about resource allocation. I understand funding constraints, Lena replied evenly. I lived on $12 a week for groceries while trying to feed 2 babies. But framing adequate support as idealistic instead of essential is part of the problem. We've normalized inadequacy and called it pragmatism. The room went quiet. When I couldn't afford childcare, Lena continued, I couldn't work. When I couldn't work, I couldn't afford housing. When I couldn't afford housing, I ended up in crisis. Every difficult choice about resource allocation creates human consequences. Maybe instead of accepting constraints, we should question why we've decided these particular humans aren't worth full investment. Patricia studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. I've been in this work so long, I've started accepting limitations I should be challenging. Thank you for that reminder. After the meeting, several advisors approached Lena privately to thank her for speaking up, for bringing passion back to conversations that had become too academic, too removed from actual stakes. Flying home that evening, Lena felt different. Not transformed. She was still herself, still anxious and imperfect, and figuring things out. But she'd proven something to herself, that her voice mattered, that her perspective was valuable, that she could occupy space in rooms designed to be intimidating and hold her ground. Maria was waiting at the apartment when Lena arrived, babies already asleep. How'd it go? Maria asked, gathering her things. I think I actually made a difference. Of course you did. You're Lena Brooks. Making a difference is what you do now. After Maria left, Lena checked on the sleeping babies, their faces peaceful in the dim light of the nursery. 6 months ago, she'd have given anything for this moment. Safe home, sleeping children, stable future. Now she had it, as the gratitude felt overwhelming. Her phone buzzed. Message from Ethan. Claire wants to know if you're free for dinner next weekend. She's in town and insists on meeting you. Fair warning, she's a lot. Lena smiled and typed back, I'd love to meet her. Thanks for sharing me with your family. Thanks for letting me be part of yours. The words hit differently than they might have months ago. Because somewhere along the way, that's what had happened. Ethan had become family, not in the traditional sense, not bound by blood or romance, but by something deeper. By showing up consistently, by believing in her when she couldn't believe in herself, by using his power to amplify rather than diminish. That weekend, Lena met Claire at a bistro in Brooklyn. Ethan's sister was warm and loud and exactly as advertised. She hugged Lena like they were old friends and immediately started asking rapid-fire questions about the babies while showing pictures of her own 4 children. Ethan talks about you constantly, Claire said after they'd ordered. Lena this, Lena that. It's actually kind of adorable. He talks about you too. The book you're writing sounds amazing. It's therapeutic more than anything. Processing 6 years of my husband being gone more than he's here, raising kids who barely know their father, navigating systems that claim to support military families but actually just create more bureaucracy. Claire paused. Ethan told me what happened on that flight, about how he helped you. He changed my life. He says you changed his, that before meeting you, he was good at his job but disconnected from why it mattered. You reminded him. Lena felt her throat tighten. I didn't do anything except be a mess. You were human in a moment when everyone else was pretending humanity didn't matter. That's everything. Claire leaned forward. Can I tell you something? When Ethan called me that night, after your flight, he was different, more present, more engaged. He said he'd witnessed something that made him realize how broken our systems are, how much work needed to be done. You woke something up in him. I think he woke something up in me too. They talked for 2 hours about motherhood and struggle and the specific loneliness of doing it largely alone. Claire shared stories from her deployments, moments of crisis where she'd had to be everything to everyone while falling apart inside. Lena shared her own moments of desperation, the times she'd locked herself in the bathroom to cry while the babies screamed. We're survivors, Claire said finally, not because we're special, but because we didn't have the option to quit. That's not heroic, it's just reality, but it does give us a particular kind of strength. I don't feel strong most days. None of us do. But strength isn't feeling powerful. It's showing up anyway when everything in you wants to run. When Lena got home that night, she found an email from Catherine Wheeler. The advisory council wanted to feature her in a documentary about their work, showing how lived experience informed policy development. They'd film over several months following her daily life and council participation. Another opportunity, another chance to be visible, to tell her story, to use what she'd survived to help others survive too. She thought about that woman on the plane, the one who'd just wanted to disappear, who'd believed her struggle was shameful and her presence was a burden. That woman wouldn't recognize who Lena was becoming, this person who said yes to terrifying opportunities, who spoke truth to power, who refused to accept that her pain was meaningless. But that woman was still here too, underneath all the growth and change, still scared, still uncertain, still learning how to take up space without apologizing for it. Lena pulled out her phone and texted Ethan. "They want to make a documentary about me and the advisory work. I think I'm going to say yes." His response came quickly. "You absolutely should. The world needs to see what you're building." "What we are building," she corrected. "Fair enough. Partners in changing broken systems." "Partners," Lena agreed. And in that moment, looking around her small apartment with her sleeping babies in the next room and her phone full of opportunities that had seemed impossible months ago, Lena Brooks allowed herself to believe something radical, that she deserved this, all of it, not because she'd suffered, but because she'd survived and chosen to transform that survival into something larger than herself. That was worth believing in. The documentary crew arrived on a cold November morning, their equipment filling Lena's small apartment with an energy that felt both exciting and invasive. The director, a woman named Aisha with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor, spent the first hour just talking with Lena about her comfort levels and boundaries. "We're not here to exploit your story," Aisha explained. "We're here to document the intersection of personal experience and systemic change. You're in control of what we film and what makes the final cut." "I appreciate that," Lena said, bouncing Mason on her hip while Mia played on the floor nearby. "But I also know documentary editing can shape narratives in ways subjects don't always anticipate." Aisha smiled. "You've done your research. I've learned to protect myself and my children." "Good. That's exactly the energy we want to capture. Not victimhood, but agency. Not helplessness, but transformation." They filmed Lena's daily routine over the next several weeks. Morning chaos with the babies, her online coursework, video calls with the advisory council, her writing work for the parenting column. It felt strange having cameras document the mundane moments she'd always considered private. But Aisha had a gift for making the crew invisible, for capturing authentic life rather than performed reality. The footage that mattered most came during Lena's second trip to Washington for an advisory council presentation. They were proposing comprehensive reforms to childcare subsidy programs, and Lena had been asked to present the section on application accessibility. Standing before a room full of HHS officials and policy directors, Lena felt the familiar flutter of nervousness. But she'd learned something over the past months. Fear didn't mean she was doing it wrong. Fear meant it mattered. The current application process assumes applicants have time, literacy, computer access, and the ability to navigate bureaucratic language, she began, clicking to her first slide. For the parents who most need assistance, these assumptions create insurmountable barriers. She walked them through her own experience, the 17-page form she'd abandoned twice before finally completing it, the documentation requirements that assumed she had a stable address and filing system, the wait times that meant the difference between keeping or losing employment. Every barrier you build to prevent fraud also prevents access for legitimate applicants, Lena continued, and the cost of that prevention, measured in families who slip through cracks, in children who go without care, in parents who can't work, far exceeds any savings from catching the tiny percentage attempting abuse. An official in the back raised his hand. "What you're describing would require significant system overhaul. The resources needed for that level of accessibility are less than what we currently spend on emergency interventions when families reach crisis points," Lena interrupted, then caught herself. "I apologize for cutting you off, but I've done the math. Prevention is always cheaper than crisis response. We just prefer crisis response because it feels more dramatic, more necessary. Prevention is invisible. You never see the disasters that didn't happen." The room was silent. Then Patricia, the nonprofit veteran who'd challenged Lena before, started clapping. Others joined in. After the presentation, Catherine Wheeler pulled Lena aside. That was exceptional, direct, data-driven, and passionate. Exactly what we need. I was too aggressive with that official. You were appropriately assertive with someone trying to hide behind bureaucratic excuses. There's a difference. Catherine paused. I want to recommend you for something. There's a White House initiative forming around family economic security. They need advisors with your particular combination of lived experience and policy understanding. Interested? Lena's first instinct was to say no, to insist she wasn't qualified, to retreat into the safety of small expectations. But she thought about Claire's words. Strength isn't feeling powerful, it's showing up anyway. Yes, she said, I'm interested. The documentary cameras caught that moment, Lena's face cycling through disbelief, fear, and determination. Later, when Aisha showed her the footage, Lena barely recognized herself. This woman looked confident, capable, certain of her value. When had that happened? December brought unexpected developments. The twins turned 9 months old, hitting milestones that made Lena simultaneously proud and wistful about how fast time was moving. Mason started pulling himself up on furniture. Mia babbled constantly in sounds that almost resembled words, and both of them had developed distinct personalities that delighted and exhausted her in equal measure. Lena's certification program was nearly complete. Just one more exam and she'd be qualified for medical coding positions that paid actual living wages. The housing program had offered her a permanent apartment in the same building, rent-controlled and hers for as long as she needed it. Financial stability, once an impossible dream, was becoming actual reality. But the most unexpected development came during a coffee meeting with Ethan 2 weeks before Christmas. They'd fallen into a comfortable pattern, meeting every week or two when his schedule allowed, talking about everything and nothing, the kind of friendship that felt essential rather than optional. Today he seemed distracted, less present than usual. Everything okay? Lena asked. Ethan stirred his coffee without drinking it. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you'll take it. Her stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. It's not bad. At least, I don't think it's bad. But it affects you, so you should know. He took a breath. The board is promoting me. Global expansion role. It's based in London. The words hit like physical impact. London. Across an ocean. The person who'd become her anchor, her friend, her partner in all of this. Leaving. When? She managed. Officially? March. But I'd need to start transitioning in January, spending more time there, less time here. That's great. A promotion, you deserve it. Lena. Really, it's wonderful. You've worked hard for this. Lena, look at me. She met his eyes and felt tears spill over despite her best efforts to contain them. I don't want you to go, she whispered. I don't want to go either. Not if it means losing this. He gestured between them. Our friendship, these conversations, being part of your life and you being part of mine. London isn't that far. We can video call. It'll be fine. Will it? Lena wiped her eyes. It has to be. You can't turn down this opportunity because of me. That's not fair to either of us. What if I don't care about fair? What if I care about what matters? This matters. Your career, your growth, that matters. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something I've been trying not to say? Always. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, the advisory work, the documentary, watching you transform into this incredible force, I started seeing you differently. Not as the struggling mother I helped on a plane, but as someone I couldn't imagine my life without. Someone I looked forward to seeing, whose opinion I valued above almost anyone else's, whose presence made everything better. Lena's heart was racing. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything, he continued quickly. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're rebuilding your life and don't need romantic complications. I just needed to be honest before I left. You deserve honesty. She stared at him. This man who'd seen her at her lowest and somehow found something worth valuing, whose kindness had been consistent even when she couldn't reciprocate, who'd never made her feel like she owed him anything. Can I be honest too? She asked. Please. I've been trying very hard not to develop feelings for you, because the power dynamic felt too complicated, because I was terrified of ruining our friendship, because I didn't think I deserved to want something just for me instead of for my children. She took a shaky breath. But I failed. I have feelings, strong ones, and hearing you're leaving is breaking something I didn't realize was that fragile. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. So what do we do? I don't know. You have to take this job. It's too important for your career. And you have to stay here. The advisory work, the stability you've built, you can't abandon that. So we're stuck. Maybe not stuck. Maybe just complicated. They sat holding hands across the table, the cafe bustling around them with holiday shoppers and tourists, completely unaware that something significant was shifting between two people in the corner booth. We could try long distance, Ethan said finally. See what develops without the pressure of proximity. That seems hard. Everything worth doing is hard. You taught me that. Lena smiled through her tears. When did I teach you that? Every single day since we met. You've shown me that hard doesn't mean impossible, that struggle doesn't mean failure, that showing up counts even when you're scared. You make me sound much braver than I feel. You are much braver than you feel. That's the whole point. They finished their coffee making tentative plans, video calls, messages, visits when possible. It wasn't ideal, but it was something, a beginning rather than an ending. As they were leaving, Ethan stopped her. Lena, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with us personally, professionally, romantically, you don't need me anymore. You've built a foundation that's entirely yours. The advisory work, the column, the White House initiative, that's all you. I was just the door opener. You're the one who walked through and built something extraordinary. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe not. But you're doing it now, and you'll keep doing it regardless of where I am geographically. That's what matters. Christmas came with unexpected warmth. Lena decorated her apartment with the twins' help, which mostly meant keeping them from eating ornaments while she strung lights. Maria came for dinner, as did several other mothers from the housing program. It wasn't the family Christmas she'd imagined years ago, but it was family nonetheless, chosen, earned, real. Ethan sent gifts for the babies, beautifully wrapped packages containing educational toys and books. His card was simple. For Mia and Mason, who taught their mom to be brave, and for their mom, who taught me to see clearly. Merry Christmas. E. New Year's brought the documentary's rough-cut screening. Aisha invited Lena to the editing studio to watch before the final version was complete. Seeing her life condensed into 90 minutes felt surreal. The footage started with that Today Show interview, then jumped back to document her daily routine. The chaos of managing twins, the focused intensity of her coursework, the passion of her advisory work. They'd interwoven interviews with Maria, Catherine Wheeler, even Claire. And they'd included something Lena hadn't known about, an interview with Ethan talking about that flight. I'd flown incognito dozens of times, his voice said, over footage of airplanes taking off. I thought I understood what passengers experienced. But watching Lena that night, watching her struggle while being judged instead of supported, watching her carry impossible weight alone, it shattered my assumptions. She didn't just need help. She deserved help. And the system I'd built had failed her completely. The documentary showed Lena's presentation to HHS, her interactions with other advisory council members, the moment Catherine offered her the White House opportunity. It showed her with the babies, exhausted but devoted. It showed her writing her column, video calling with other struggling mothers, gradually building community from isolation. The final scene was footage from a support group Lena had started attending, a circle of single mothers sharing their struggles without judgment. The camera caught Lena listening intently to another woman's story, her expression full of recognition and compassion. A year ago, I thought my struggle was unique, Lena's voiceover said, that I was uniquely broken, uniquely failing. But the truth is, millions of parents are navigating impossible systems designed without them in mind. The difference now is I have tools to fight back, and every tool I gain, I share, because we're not supposed to do this alone. We were never supposed to do this alone. When the screening ended, Lena sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. Too much? Aisha asked gently. No, it's perfect. It's honest. It's It's my life, but bigger somehow, more meaningful. Because you're seeing it from outside your own perspective. You're seeing what everyone else sees, someone who took trauma and transformed it into purpose. The documentary premiered at a film festival in January to standing ovations. It was picked up for streaming distribution and scheduled for release in March. Suddenly, Lena's story wasn't just reaching the people in advisory meetings or reading her column, it was reaching millions. February brought the White House interview. Lena flew to Washington wearing a suit she'd bought specifically for the occasion, her resume highlighting experience that would have seemed laughable a year ago. The interview panel included senior policy advisors and the director of the Domestic Policy Council. They asked about her background, her perspective, her vision for family economic security. Lena answered honestly, drawing on everything she'd learned, the systems that had failed her, the support that had saved her, the changes that were possible when people actually listened to those most affected. "Why should we select you for this role?" one advisor asked. "You're competing against people with decades of policy experience." "Because I'm not competing with them," Lena said clearly. "I'm complementing them. They have expertise in how systems work theoretically. I have expertise in how systems work for the people using them. You need both perspectives to create effective policy. Some might argue your experience is too recent, too personal to provide objective perspective. I'd argue my experience is recent enough to remember the specific barriers and personal enough to never lose sight of the human cost of policy failures. Objectivity without empathy creates technically sound policies that fail real people. We need both." She got the position. The call came 2 weeks later, and Lena sat on her apartment floor crying while the babies crawled around her, completely oblivious to the significance of the moment. She'd been selected as a community advisor to the White House Domestic Policy Council, a 2-year position that would involve monthly trips to Washington and regular consultation on family support initiatives. She called Ethan first. He was in London, 6 hours ahead, probably in some meeting, but he answered immediately. "I got it," she said without preamble. "The White House position. They picked me." "Of course they did. You're brilliant." "I'm terrified." "Also, of course." "When do you start?" "April, after the documentary releases." "Perfect timing." "Lena, I'm so proud of you. You've come so far." "We've come so far," she corrected. "This doesn't happen without you. This happens because of you. I was just the catalyst. You did the work." They talked for an hour, Ethan asking detailed questions about the role and responsibilities, Lena admitting her fears and hopes. The conversation felt both intimate and distant, the miles between them suddenly very present. "I miss you," she said finally. "I miss you too, but I'll be back in April for the documentary premiere. We'll see each other then." "It's not the same as coffee every week." "No, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we both needed space to become who we're meant to be without the safety net of constant proximity." Very philosophical for midnight your time. Jet lag makes me profound, or incoherent, hard to tell which. March brought the documentary's release. It exploded across social media, with parents sharing their own stories, advocacy groups using it for training, policymakers discussing its implications. Lena's inbox flooded with messages. Some supportive, some critical, some just sharing their own struggles. One message stood out, from Sandra. "I watched your documentary, all of it. I want to apologize, not the halfway apology I gave before, but a real one. I was wrong. About you, about my role, about what compassion requires. You deserved support, not judgment, and I failed you. I'm working with a family advocacy group now as a volunteer trying to understand what I couldn't see during my career. I'm learning, slowly, but learning. Thank you for forcing that growth, even when I resisted it. You're doing important work. Keep going." Lena read the message 3 times, feeling something release in her chest. She didn't need Sandra's apology to move forward. She'd already done that. But receiving it anyway felt like completion, like a circle closing. She wrote back, "Thank you for this. Growth is hard at any stage of life. I'm glad you're doing the work. That matters." April arrived with cherry blossoms and the documentary premiere screening in New York. Lena wore a dress that made her feel both elegant and authentic, her hair styled professionally, the babies with a trusted sitter. She arrived at the theater to find a red carpet, photographers, journalists requesting interviews, and Ethan waiting by the entrance in a perfectly tailored suit, looking tired from travel but smiling when he saw her. "You came," she said, slightly breathless. "I promised I would. Besides, I wanted to see you in your element." "My element is chaos and coffee stains. This is someone else's element." "This is exactly your element. You've just been too busy building it to notice." They walked the red carpet together, fielding questions from journalists about the documentary's impact and policy implications. Ethan stayed close but let Lena lead, his presence supportive without being overshadowing. Inside the theater, Lena found herself surrounded by people whose lives had intersected with hers over the past year. Maria, Catherine Wheeler, several advisory council members, Claire with her entire family, even the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council. The community she'd built without quite realizing it. The screening itself was emotional. Seeing her story on a massive screen, hearing the audience react, gasps during difficult moments, laughter during lighter ones, applause after her presentations, made everything feel both more real and more surreal. When it ended, the standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. During the reception afterward, a young woman approached Lena nervously. "I saw you speak at that family advocacy summit," she said. "Your story gave me the courage to leave an abusive situation. I'm 6 months into rebuilding now. I just wanted to say thank you." Lena felt her throat close. "You did the work. I just talked about mine." Sometimes we need to see someone else survive before we believe we can too. After the woman left, Ethan appeared beside Lena. "That happened a lot?" "More than I expected. It's humbling. It's the impact of visibility. You're showing people what's possible." They found a quiet corner away from the crowd. The reception continued around them, networking, celebrating, the business of success. But in their small bubble, it was just them. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Always." "How long are you in town?" 3 days, then back to London. The expansion is consuming everything." "Do you regret taking it?" Ethan considered. "Professionally? No. It's exactly what my career needed. Personally? I regret the timing. I wish I'd figured out my feelings before accepting a position on another continent." "We could have done this differently." "Could we? You were rebuilding your entire life. I was reevaluating mine. Maybe we both needed the space to figure out who we were separately before we could figure out who we might be together." "And have you? Figured it out?" "Yeah, I have." He turned to face her fully. "I don't just care about you, Lena. I'm in love with you. With your strength and your honesty and the way you transform pain into purpose. With how you show up for your kids and your work and everyone who needs you. With who you are when you think nobody's watching." Lena's heart was hammering. "Ethan, I know the distance is complicated. I know you're starting this huge new role. I know the timing is still terrible. But I needed to tell you before I left again. Because life is short and uncertainty is guaranteed, and the only thing I'm sure of is that I want you in my life in whatever form you'll allow." Around them, the reception continued, people laughing and talking, completely unaware of this moment unfolding. "I'm in love with you too," Lena said quietly. "I've been trying not to be, because it seemed impractical and complicated and maybe unfair to you, but I am completely terrifyingly in love with you. So what do? We try. Long distance, complicated schedules, different continents, we try anyway. Because you're right. Life is short, and I've spent too much of mine being scared of wanting things." Ethan smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and transformed his face. "We're really doing this?" "Apparently, against all practical advice and common sense." "Good. Practical is overrated." He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and something settled in Lena's chest. Not completion, she'd learned she didn't need another person to complete her, but partnership. The recognition that she could be whole on her own and still choose to share that wholeness with someone else. The next morning, Lena had breakfast with Claire while Ethan worked through jet lag in his hotel room. "He's different since meeting you," Claire said over coffee. "More grounded, more purposeful, like he remembered why any of this matters." "I think we reminded each other," Lena said. "He told me about London, about trying long distance." You think we're crazy? I think love is always crazy. The question is whether it's worth it. Claire studied her. Is he worth it to you? Lena thought about that flight, about Ethan holding her screaming baby while she fell apart, about every coffee meeting since, every honest conversation, every moment he'd shown up without being asked, about how he'd used his power to lift rather than diminish, how he'd seen her potential before she could see it herself. Yeah, she said, he's worth it. Then the distance is just logistics. You'll figure it out. May brought Lena's first official White House meeting. She flew to Washington with her credentials and talking points, ready to contribute to discussions about expanding the child tax credit and reforming child care subsidies. Walking into that building, showing her ID at security, sitting in rooms where actual policy was debated and decided, it felt like living someone else's life. But it wasn't someone else's life, it was hers, built piece by piece from the rubble of everything that had fallen apart. During a break, she stepped outside and called Ethan. It was late evening in London, but he answered immediately. How's it going, he asked. Surreal. I'm literally in the White House discussing policy that will affect millions of families. A year ago, I was applying for food stamps. And now you're helping ensure other people don't have to struggle the way you did. That's full circle. It feels too big sometimes. Like I'm going to wake up and it was all a dream. It's not a dream. It's your life. You built this. We built this. Lena, you have to stop giving me credit for your work. I opened one door. You've opened dozens since then. You opened the door that mattered most, the one I couldn't open myself. She heard him exhale. I miss you. This distance is harder than I thought it would be. June, she reminded him. You're coming back in June for 2 weeks. 34 days. But who's counting? After the call, Lena returned to her meeting, contributing to discussions about implementation timelines and outreach strategies. Her suggestions were taken seriously, incorporated into planning documents, treated as valuable input rather than token inclusion. This was real. She was real. Her voice mattered. June brought Ethan's promised visit. 2 weeks in New York, carefully planned around Lena's schedule and the twins' routine. They fell into an easy rhythm, dinners after the babies were asleep, weekend outings to parks and museums, quiet mornings drinking coffee while Mason and Mia played. This could be our life, Ethan said one evening, watching Lena give the twins their bath. If we chose it. We live on different continents. For now. The London assignment is 3 years. After that, I could come back, or you could... I can't move to London, Ethan. My work is here. The advisory positions, the White House role, everything I've built. I know. I'm just thinking out loud about possibilities. Is it terrible that I don't want to think 3 years ahead? That I just want to enjoy what we have now without planning the impossible future? It's not terrible. It's honest. He dried off Mason and handed him to Lena. We'll figure it out. Somehow. But the somehow felt increasingly uncertain. The distance was taking its toll. Missed video calls due to time zones, important moments experienced separately, the constant low-level ache of wanting someone who wasn't there. In September, nearly a year after that first advisory council meeting, Lena was invited to speak at a major policy conference about the documentary's impact and the changes it had catalyzed. Thousands of attendees, keynote status, the kind of platform that could amplify her message exponentially. She accepted, prepared meticulously, and delivered a speech that was part personal testimony, part policy analysis, part call to action. Systems change when we refuse to accept that struggle is inevitable, she told the audience. When we stop treating poverty as a personal failure and start treating it as a policy choice. When we center the voices of those most affected instead of talking over them with theoretical expertise. Change is possible. I'm living proof. But it requires us to actually listen, to actually value lived experience, to actually commit to doing better. The standing ovation was immediate and sustained. Afterward, a journalist approached for an interview. There's a rumor you're being considered for a permanent position at HHS. Any truth to that? Lena's heart skipped. She hadn't heard anything official. I can't comment on rumors. But would you consider it, transitioning from advisor to actual staff? I'd consider anything that allows me to keep doing this work effectively. The offer came 2 weeks later. Deputy Director of the Office of Family Assistance, A position overseeing programs she'd personally used and critiqued. It was permanent, salaried, influential, everything she'd never imagined achieving. It also meant staying in the United States indefinitely. She called Ethan immediately. "That's incredible," he said, his enthusiasm genuine despite what it meant for them. "You have to take it. It makes us impossible. It makes us long distance for longer than we'd hoped. That's not the same as impossible. Ethan, be realistic. 3 years of this? We're already struggling at 1 year. So we struggle. We're both good at that, remember? We've overcome worse." "Have we?" Lena's voice broke. "Because this feels pretty impossible from where I'm sitting." Silence stretched across the miles between them. "I could turn down the extension," Ethan said finally. "Come back when my 3 years are up. We'd only have 2 more years apart instead of potentially 5 or 6. You can't sacrifice your career for me." "Why not? You changed your entire life trajectory. Why can't I adjust mine?" "Because I was rebuilding from nothing. You're building towards something. There's a difference." "Lena, no. Listen to me. You cannot give up opportunities because of me. That's not love. That's obligation. And I won't be anyone's obligation ever again." "You're not an obligation. You're a choice. The choice I want to make. Even if it costs you professionally?" "Even then." Lena sat in her apartment, babies asleep in the next room, holding a phone connected to a man she loved across an ocean that felt increasingly impassable. "I need to think," she said, "about the HHS offer, about us, about what I actually want versus what I think I should want." "Okay, take all the time you need. I love you." "I love you too. That doesn't change, regardless of what you decide." Over the next week, Lena talked to everyone whose opinion she trusted. Maria said, "Follow her heart." Claire said, "Follow her career." Catherine Wheeler said the HHS position was once in a lifetime. The other mothers in her support group said different things depending on their own experiences and values. Finally, she called Ethan back. "I'm taking the HHS position," she said without preamble. "Good. And I want to keep trying with us. But I need to be honest. I don't know how this works long term. I don't know if we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak. Maybe we are, but I'd rather try and fail than never try at all." "Wouldn't you?" "Yeah, I would." They established new patterns. Daily video calls, no matter the time difference. Planned visits every few months. Constant communication about both the monumental and the mundane. It wasn't perfect. Some days the distance felt crushing, but other days, hearing his voice or seeing his face on a screen was enough. Lena settled into her new role at HHS with the same intensity she'd brought to everything else. She overhauled application processes, implemented training programs based on her lived experience, pushed for policy changes that centered those most affected. She was demanding, passionate, and effective. No longer the struggling mother begging for help, but the professional ensuring help was actually available. A year into the HHS position, Lena received an unexpected call from Cascade Airlines. "Ms. Brooks, this is Jennifer Chen. We met after your flight incident." "I remember. Is everything all right?" "More than all right. I'm calling because we'd like to offer you a position on our corporate advisory board. We're expanding our family travel initiatives and need someone with your expertise and perspective." "I already have a full-time role at HHS." "This would be quarterly meetings, consulting basis. It pays well and allows you to influence policy at a major airline. We think you'd be perfect." Lena accepted, adding it to her growing portfolio of ways to create change. The irony wasn't lost on her. The airline that had been the site of her lowest moment now valued her expertise enough to pay for it. In March, 2 years after the documentary's release, Lena was invited to speak at the United Nations about family economic security and systemic barriers. Standing before that assembly, representing not just herself, but millions of struggling parents, she felt the full weight of how far she'd come. 2 years ago, I was a single mother who couldn't afford groceries, she told the international audience. Today I'm here because I refused to accept that my struggle was inevitable, because I found people who believed I deserved better and helped me build it, because I transformed my pain into purpose. Every person in this room has the power to create systems that support rather than punish, that lift rather than diminish. The question is whether we'll use that power. I'm using mine. What will you do with yours? The response was overwhelming. Requests for meetings, invitations to advise other countries' programs, opportunities to expand her impact globally. That evening, alone in her hotel room, Lena video called Ethan. I spoke at the UN today, she said when his face appeared on screen. I know, I watched the live stream. You were magnificent. I kept thinking about that flight, about how different everything is now. Everything except what matters most. You're still the same person. You just have the resources now to be who you always were. I miss you. It's been 4 months since London. I know, but I have news. I'm coming back permanently. The board is restructuring, and I've been offered the COO position, based in New York, starting in 3 months. Lena's breath caught. Are you serious? Completely. I told you I'd come back. Took longer than planned, but I'm coming back. If you still want me to. If I still... Ethan, of course I want you to. I've wanted you to for 2 years. Good. Because I'm done with distance. I'm ready for proximity, for daily coffee instead of weekly calls, for being there when the babies take their first steps instead of seeing it on video, for building a life together instead of building separate lives that occasionally intersect. Lena was crying now, happy tears that she didn't bother wiping away. The twins aren't babies anymore. They're almost 3. They run and talk and have opinions about everything. Then I'm ready for proximity with opinionated toddlers, even better. 3 months later, Ethan moved back to New York. They took things slowly, dating properly this time. Dinners without children, weekend trips while the twins stayed with Maria, the normal progression of a relationship without the complication of distance or crisis. 6 months after his return, Ethan proposed, not dramatically or publicly, but quietly in Lena's apartment after the twins were asleep, with a ring he'd had designed based on conversations about what she'd actually want versus what tradition demanded. I'm not asking you to complete me or save me or fix anything, he said. I'm asking if you want to build a life together as equals, as partners, as 2 whole people choosing each other every day. Yes, Lena said without hesitation. Yes to all of that. They married the following spring in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Maria stood as Lena's maid of honor. Claire stood for Ethan. Mia and Mason, now 4 years old, served as flower children with varying degrees of success. During the reception, someone asked Lena how it felt to have a fairy tale ending. It's not a fairy tale, she said, watching Ethan dance with Mason while Mia demanded her turn. Fairy tales are about rescue. This is about partnership, about 2 people who saw each other clearly and chose to build something together. That's better than any fairy tale. 5 years after that flight, Lena stood in her HHS office reviewing the latest data on their reformed childcare subsidy program. Applications were up 40%. Approval rates had increased. Wait times had dropped. Real families were getting real help because of work she'd championed. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. Parent-teacher conference at 3. Can you make it? Tabkeches? Wouldn't miss it, she typed back. Another text. I'm proud of you for everything, always. Lena looked around her office, walls covered with photos of her family, awards she'd received, letters from parents thanking her for changes that had improved their lives. She thought about that desperate woman on the airplane, the one who'd thought she was failing, who'd believed her struggle was shameful. That woman would never believe this future was possible, but it was. It was real and earned, and hers. Not because someone had rescued her, but because someone had seen her potential and helped her recognize it herself. Because she'd chosen to transform pain into purpose, to use her voice when silence seemed safer, to keep showing up even when terrified. The journey from that flight to this moment hadn't been linear or easy. It had been messy and complicated and full of setbacks. But it had been hers, every difficult step, every hard choice, every moment of growth. And standing here now, professionally accomplished, personally fulfilled, surrounded by love she'd earned rather than love she'd settled for, Lena Brooks finally allowed herself to believe what Ethan had told her years ago. She was enough. She'd always been enough. The struggle had never been a reflection of her worth. It had been a reflection of broken systems, and she'd spent 5 years helping fix them. That evening, Lena sat at the parent-teacher conference with Ethan, listening to Mason's teacher describe his love of building blocks and Mia's obsession with storytelling. Their children were thriving, confident, curious, loved. Walking out afterward, Ethan took her hand. "Remember that flight?" he asked. "Every day. How could I forget?" "Do you ever wish it had gone differently, that you'd never had to go through that?" Lena considered. The humiliation, the desperation, the public shame, all of it had been genuinely awful. But it had also been the catalyst for everything that came after. The advocacy, the policy changes, the lives improved, the partnership with Ethan, the purpose she'd found. "No," she said finally. "I don't wish it had gone differently. I wish the systems had been different so I never needed that breaking point. But given the reality of what happened, I'm grateful for where it led." To hear, she agreed. They walked to their car where Mason and Mia were already arguing about whose turn it was to pick dinner. Normal family chaos. Normal family joy. Lena had learned something crucial through all of this. Strength wasn't never struggling. Strength was struggling and choosing to grow from it. Choosing to help others who came after. Choosing to believe that broken systems could be fixed and broken people could heal and hard things could become beautiful if you refused to give up. She'd been that desperate woman on the plane, certain she was failing. She'd become this woman walking through a parking lot, hand in hand with her partner, listening to her children debate pizza versus tacos, knowing she'd used her pain to create something meaningful. Both women were her, both stories were true, and somewhere out there, on another flight, another struggling mother was having her worst moment. Maybe someone would help her. Maybe someone would see her humanity instead of her struggle. And maybe, if Lena kept doing her work, systems would shift enough that help became standard rather than exceptional. That struggling parents received support instead of shame. That compassion became policy instead of exception. That was the goal. That was the purpose. That was how she transformed that awful flight into something that mattered. Not by erasing the pain, but by ensuring it meant something. That felt like victory. That felt like home.